This episode is made possible by our generous patrons.
Welcome to the Inktofilm podcast, where we read the book
And then see the movie.
I'm Luke.
And I'm James.
And this week we discuss Peter George's 1958 thriller, Red Alert. So I'm coming to you from my in-laws' condo, up the street a little bit from mine because they're doing some construction there. So if I sound a little different, maybe a little more echoey, that's because I'm in a different room.
It was generous of them to let you use that room. Very nice. Otherwise, it would have been flapping plastic, right?
No, probably someone sawing, at least this time of day. It wouldn't have been good. They're very generous of them to let me use it, so thank you if they do listen. But yeah, I mean, if I sound a little hollow or something, that's what's going on. It won't be permanent. It'll just be until they finish the construction on my patio or whatever they're doing, balcony. Once they're done with that, I'll be back to normal.
So how about this book, Red Alert?
Yeah, a throwback novel for us, 1958. Although I guess we've definitely covered a few older than that. Not our oldest, but pretty old.
I felt like I could feel how old it was, kind of. Also, some Cold War era tendencies in the book.
Well, this was an extremely topical novel for a certain time, and so it struck a chord, I think, with people, and probably Stanley Kubrick, who made Dr. Strangelove, which we should say that this novel formed the basis for Dr. Strangelove. That's why we're covering it. I think in the long term, it's probably not widely read because some of that topical nature is going to fade pretty quickly as soon as you get out of the time frame that it's set, right? So as soon as the Cold War is over, a novel like this is just going to see a reduction in the interest, where you get something like Lord of the Rings, where it seems like people are coming back to it, in a modern day, or any other number of classic novels that are a little bit more timeless.
This is just what I was feeling, was the writings of someone who was afraid of some sort of, nuclear attack or some sort of meltdown and nations fighting. And, it's strangely, we covered Children of Men, and it's fairly relevant now with what's going on. And it feels like this is kind of a harbinger, hopefully not, but it's it seems like there's maybe some parallels to what's going on now in terms of people who are in power and people who are making decisions.
I mean, I definitely was thinking of some of our command structure right now, and you can't help but do that. And when I say that, I say in America. Also, it's interesting to see a book where the Russians are sort of the enemy, right? Although that's not really the enemy here. It's kind of an enemy within, actually, in this novel. But that's who America is essentially at war with, and that's where this nuclear arms race is directed. And yeah, I mean, obviously nowadays it seems like it's more information warfare and trying to destabilize things that way, influence elections, so on and so forth. But I want to focus on this book without getting too much into that, because otherwise I feel like we're going to get lost. We're going to lose the focus here a little bit. But we can talk about it as it comes out.
We just recently went on the podcast Watch, Review, Repeat, who are friends podcast, and it was really fun to go on there and talk about Stranger Things 3, and there's a Russian plot line in that show, and it kind of got me. I thought it was a funny coincidence that we're covering Russian stuff. And then with
Chernobyl is something we both have really enjoyed that we watched on HBO, which is obviously although it was more Soviet Union, I guess it's Ukraine now, but still, you know what I mean? It seems like that's topical right now, and I think for a reason that has infiltrated our media in some ways. This is accidental because this is an old thing. So
right. I want to talk about. I guess we should talk about it in spoilers more, but this idea of people unilaterally making decisions that affect millions and things like that. Definitely think that's something that comes up in this book, and then again in the movie, and I think that it's it's just scary, right? It's really
Oh yeah, no. This book is definitely scary, and it's not to say that like this kind of shit still couldn't happen. I know that there's been advancements in technology and the way these systems are run, and you would hope that it's not as susceptible to this sort of thing. But speaking of the spoiler, non-spoiler stuff, I think we should have a pretty short non-spoiler section, just where we talk about the book a little bit in general, and then we'll get right into spoilers. You can decide if this sounds like something you want to read at that point, but if not, we welcome you to just listen. We'll go over the plot and let you know what happens in it. If you're a fan of Doctor Strangelove and you're just curious about this book, it's a really good way to, I think, to get an experience of what it's like without having to actually read it.
Yeah, so I guess just to get some of my general thoughts on it, with Doctor Strangelove being one of my favorite satirical movies, it's really weird to see the serious version of this story. And in a weird way, you can see exactly what Kubrick was reading, and then he just extrapolated it out to make it funny, because it's so close. It's so like, it teeters the line of absurdity, and if you just tip it a little bit more, it can be that satirical, funny, over the top movie that we get. Yeah,
because it's this is a serious novel. However, it borders on absurdity, like you said, a few times. And I think Kubrick picked up on that and decided to emphasize that. Also notable, there is no Doctor Strangelove character in this book, so that's kind of a big change.
What would that even look like in this book? It would be so weird.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wanted some sort of like scientist character, but we didn't get any of that.
Yeah.
But in general, so this is a thriller. Did you find that you were gripped by it? Did you find it engaging? What was your experience reading it?
I have to be honest, like, I didn't find it all that engaging. I think it was an interesting read because I liked Doctor Strangelove, but it didn't engage me all that much. I felt myself like wanting to stop, and I did stop a few times and put it down and come back to it. So yeah, I don't know if that's because it's of a certain time, or if, it didn't do its job as a thriller, but it was thrilling. There were moments where I could see like, this is a very tense moment, and I kind of got it. But what'd you think?
I think it's more the former. This is a product of its time, because if we were currently in the height of the Cold War reading this book, you can see how it would be really terrifying. Right? If it was like, if you didn't know, like, if this could be happening right now, like, these are the systems that are in place. These are the bombs. These are the planes. Like, this is exactly what's happening right now. Versus this, like, look back at a point in history where this was the technology and this was the situation, which gives us enough distance to where maybe it's not as, like, scary as it would be, which engages that thriller kind of hook.
And that's not to mention where America was at that time, like as a country coming out of World War II, seemingly saving the world and being the heroes that the U.S. were in World War II. And it's really interesting to think of where Americans were thinking of, like, their politics and like the government protecting them, and if they would protect them. And this is like a kind of almost pre-American corruption. There was corruption, but it was just like, it was before the general public was really tapped into how much corruption was there. You know what I mean? We're talking like pre-Nixon, a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, you're right. And this is also a time in which the Soviet Union was at the height of its power, whereas we, obviously it has changed over time. Chernobyl happened, the Soviet Union destabilized and eventually fell, and so this was when it was neck and neck. The space race was happening, right? And
so all of that is, yeah, and all of that to say, like, that's just how much more terrifying it would be to read the book in the context of the time period it came out, for sure.
Right. But I do agree with you. It because it's not that time, and I was trying to put myself in that mindset as much as possible. I was struggling a little bit. It also didn't help. I read the the ebook version, and there was quite a few weird typos and, I don't know, transposition errors or something. It was, in my opinion, not a great job of this audiobook. I keep wanting to call it audio. This ebook. And that's unfortunate, because I assumed this wasn't present in the original novel, but maybe it was. I don't know. Did you catch that? Did that throw you off any, or did you not even notice it?
I saw a couple, yeah. And I just had to assume that there was some sort of, whoever was typing the stuff up, or, moving it over from text or whatever program they were using made an error, and people, it's not a big enough book to where people are like up in arms if there's a typo in it.
Right. Which is kind of unfortunate though, because it's like, it just takes you out of it whenever like some important line is garbled in some way because something got left out or something. And there's a little bit of that. And then, like you said, the characters are, I mean, in thriller fashion, the characters are fairly flat. Like, we don't spend a lot of time developing them. It's more just like in the moment. Now, that's not to say it's poorly written. I think it does a good job. I think there are moments that I found particularly engaging. And I can see a lot of the blueprint for the film that got made, which is obviously a classic. I don't know. I guess if you're interested, if you're a huge fan of Dr. Strangelove and you're curious about this book, then I do recommend reading it. But beyond that, I don't think this is a book that people should feel like they're missing out if they didn't read it. I think it's probably fine to skip out on and maybe just listen to this episode.
Yeah, but definitely watch the movie because I just recommend it highly.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to mention the fact, speaking of mega fans of Dr. Strangelove, this podcast, this project here was actually paid for by a patron that we have in our jukebox category, which is really exciting. This is
Stephen E.
Yeah, this is the second one that he's been able to commission. And it's just so cool. Like we probably would have done this eventually, but the idea that he wanted us to do it to the point that he was willing to pay for it is really awesome.
Yeah. And we didn't have any plans to do it anytime soon.
Oh,
I mean, it definitely moved up. Like, we probably wouldn't have done it this year. So he definitely affected it. We're doing it now because he has earned, he earned the number of tokens to unlock it and unlocked it. And speaking of those tokens, we are actually doing a special offer right now for any patron. If you're a patron on August 11th, which is going to be in celebration of our 100th episode. And if you're a patron, if you're an existing patron or you're a new patron, it doesn't matter. As long as you're a patron on that date, you're going to get a token. And you can use them to commission a project just like this, or put them towards a project to indicate that you want us to cover it, and then we'll definitely move it up the list. So if you've ever thought about supporting this podcast and financially, which would be a great help to us if you do, now's the best time to sign up.
For our 100th episode celebration, we're also doing a really cool thing where we're reaching out to our listeners, and we're asking our listeners to record an audio file on your phone using like your voice memo app or whatever you have on your phone that'll allow you to record an audio file. Actually, why don't you know the three questions better than I do, right? So the three questions are...
Let's see if I can remember them off the top of my head.
What's an adaptation that you love?
Yeah, what's your favorite adaptation? Adaptation you love, what have you. You could choose that if you want to tell us that. You can also share with us an adaptation that is coming out, that hasn't come out yet, that you're excited about and why. And then you can also share with us a book that you are a fan of that you think would make for a great adaptation. Any of those three prompts, whatever interests you most, go ahead and record that. Just try and keep the clip under 60 seconds. Doesn't have to be 60 seconds, but we're looking to put a bunch of them in the episode itself and react to them and talk about them. So we welcome you to to send that in to inktofilm@gmail.com. And just make sure to say your first name and where you're from in the clip as well.
So we're really looking forward to reacting to those and talking about them. We're kind of trying to check them, make sure they're good without listening to them, so we can freshly react to them.
At least one of us will have not heard it.
Right. So it'll be cool.
Yeah.
It'll be cool to get those live reactions basically on our part when we record our episode.
Absolutely. And so we're excited about the 100th episode. We hope you'll join us for that. It's going to be coming here in, I guess, less than a month. It's coming soon. But let's get back to Red Alert. I want to talk to you a little bit about Peter George. Now, you might notice this, if you look this book up online, you'll see Peter Bryant sometimes is the author listed. And that's because Peter George used a pseudonym or a nom de plume to write this novel. And the reason he did that is because he was an active service member of the RAF in England at the time of writing this novel. And so he, first off, couldn't write it about Britain. He had to write it about the US because of certain agreements that he was under for being an active service member. And then he also chose to do a pseudonym to disguise his identity a little bit.
Wow.
So he fought in World War II as a pilot and on different planes. So a lot of this stuff from the plane's perspective, especially, I believe, is very authentic to an experience that he might have had. So very cool in that regard.
That's really interesting. I did not realize that. So you would think he potentially wanted to write it from the perspective of England.
Maybe, yeah, and that's at least the theory, is that he couldn't because of certain agreements he had. Yeah,
Interesting.
So he was actually a Welsh author who was born in 1924. He would die 8 years after this novel's publication in 1966 due to a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Whoa.
I don't want to go down conspiracy rabbit holes, but when I was Googling it, there was at least a couple of people out there who were openly suggesting that maybe he was taken out. And that it wasn't actually a suicide. I didn't see any evidence. It just seemed like more like people were saying like, oh, because all of his novels seem to be about the threat of nuclear war and like how terrible the nuclear threat is. And it seems to be something that was like constantly on his mind. And people were like, why are you so worried about the, humanity's, ability to survive if you're going to kill yourself? That kind of thing.
Right.
But that's not proof of anything. That's just speculation, and you have no idea what his mental state was like. So, seemingly committed suicide from all accounts. From what I have seen, he was preoccupied with the idea of how can we go forward with this threat, and it overwhelmed him. Do you know when Dr. Strangelove actually came out?
Yeah, it was 64. So he was able to see it released.
Yeah, so 2 years later, it's pretty wild, right? He was only 41 years old, is what I read.
Wow.
Young guy. He had written a bunch of novels, actually. I think I see about 8 of them here. He had another one also that was in the works, but he never finished when he died, which is another thing people took as like proof. Like, why would he not finish the book or whatever? I don't know.
I mean, it is interesting to think of a potential conspiracy theory where he knew something that he was trying to convey through his books or something, or at least warn people and make them aware.
Which is why I think some people are speculating that, but right. I don't know. There's no evidence for it, so we got to keep that in mind. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is that like it's supposedly difficult to own a weapon like in Britain at the time. So like, how did he get the gun? I don't know. I don't know the rules in Britain and like how you can go about doing it, but it seems like if you're a serviceman, you probably can get access to a weapon, I would assume.
It sounds like you're sold, dude. It sounds like you're in on the conspiracy.
I honestly debated whether or not I wanted to even mention it,
right?
Just because it does seem pretty out there, but I don't know. It potentially could be interesting, and
right.
And that's one of the few things we could talk about with this. So one of the other things, initially he was not a fan of Kubrick's concept of recasting this as a satire, but eventually agreed to it, and it seems like he is credited as kind of co-writing the screenplay, although how much actual input he had, I think, is unclear. And then after the fact, he actually wrote a novelization of Dr. Strangelove, where it was more in keeping with the tone of the film, and he dedicated that book to Stanley Kubrick.
I had heard that he made a novelization, but I didn't know that he like dedicated it to Kubrick. That's cool. Yeah. It must be really weird for Kubrick to approach you and like say I want to film this. And I think at this point, having done like Paths to Glory and he's kind of already made a name for himself.
Yeah, so but he wasn't the Kubrick that like. When did 2001: Space Odyssey come out?
After Strangelove.
After this, so yeah, this was before The Shining. This was before
Clockwork Orange,
the Vietnam War movie he did.
Oh, no, Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket. Thank you. That's what it was. So I think this is before all of that. But right. Yeah, it seems like he had maybe done a few things. So another interesting tidbit about this book is that around the time it came, or shortly after it got purchased by Kubrick to be developed, another novel by the name Failsafe was written around the same time and was purchased by another filmmaker and they started developing another film that seemed to have a similar plot, and it was also about sort of the nuclear arms race. There was already a couple big actors signed on, and so Kubrick and Peter George were a little bit worried about what this is going to do to the film's success, because both were slated to come out around the same time. But they ended up suing failsafe because apparently it was very similar for copyright infringement. And it seems to have been significant enough that they actually settled it out of court. So it wasn't just like tossed out or something. Like they actually reached a settlement out of court about it. I'm assuming paying Peter George. This delayed the film to where it ended up coming out after Doctor Strangelove. And so their strategy seemed to work.
So I also heard something about he potentially wanted to make he didn't have the satirical angle until he heard there was a similar movie coming out, and then he pivoted to make it satirical. I don't know if you've read or if there's factual or not. I'll have to look more into that for the movie episode.
I don't know. I did read that part of the lawsuit was over the character of Doctor Strangelove, because apparently there's a very similar character in Failsafe. However, there is no character like that in Peter George's novel.
Yeah.
So that
sounds like a
sort of
screenplay
interesting. Like, how did they argue? Yeah, was maybe they were saying they stole from the screenplay somehow or something, got a hold of it. I don't know.
So I went ahead and looked up Failsafe. I wasn't familiar with the movie, but I am familiar with the director. It's Sidney Lumet, and
yes,
who is known for 12 Angry Men and Network, which just those are two like completely classic films that everyone would tell you are fantastic films. So it's not like it was some random director. It was like a well-known fantastic director who was also trying to get a movie made at the same time as Kubrick. So another thing about Failsafe is that the cast is like really well known. It's like Henry Fonda, Walter Matthau. It's like there's some people in this. So it wasn't like it was it was like a full-on film, and it had stars attached to it and everything, and that's why I had heard that Kubrick was a little worried that like financially his movie would suffer, and Failsafe was slated to come out first, like you said, right?
Yes.
And then was pushed to after. Sounds like they had some sort of grounds.
And the rest was history. Yeah, and you don't think they'd settle out of court unless it just became like maybe they just wanted to expedite the process and it was better to do that. Who knows? I couldn't find any information further than that, though, from what I saw.
Really interesting stuff. Yeah, I think we'll talk a little more about maybe some of that stuff on the movie episode. Yeah. Just the Kubrick side of it.
Speaking of the movie, I've only seen the movie once, and it was probably about 10 years ago. I don't feel like I remember it that well, other than a few scenes and a few like iconic exchanges. So I'm very excited to watch this movie again, especially knowing all I know more about Kubrick from covering The Shining with you in a previous episode and stuff like that. So I'm into it. I'm excited for next week. But let's buckle in and talk about Red Alert, the novel. So if you're ready, I think I want to get into the plot, which will include some spoilers. So if you're sold on the book, stop now. Go read it. It's a pretty quick read. I read it in a couple days. Not too bad, but otherwise, just stick around. Okay, so in a paranoid delusion, moribund U.S. Air Force General Quinton unilaterally launches an airborne preventative nuclear attack upon the Soviet Union from his command at the Sonora, Texas Strategic Air Command, SAC, bomber base by ordering the 843rd Bomb Wing to attack using Warplan Wing Attack Plan R, which authorizes a lower echelon SAC commander to retaliate after an enemy first strike has decapitated the U.S. government. He attacks with the entire B-52 bomber wing of new aircraft, each armed with 2 nuclear weapons, and protected with the electronic countermeasures to prevent the Soviets from shooting them down. Okay, so that is the premise of the novel. That's what kicks everything off. So let's talk about this a little bit here.
So yeah, this is what I was talking about before. This idea that somebody, with a grudge, or somebody who thinks they're trying to future-proof some sort of attack or put a preemptive strike, could I don't know, make a decision like this, and I'm assuming, like you said, there's different things in place to prevent this from happening, but somebody has their finger on the button, and if they're having a bad day or they get something in their head,
that might be
right, then I just, it's really, really terrifying. It's like, we live this life where there's horrors that happen every day, but it's just crazy that one push of the button and everything's gone.
And this threat is still there. And in fact, it's the bombs are even more dangerous. They talk a little bit in this about how these bombs are order of magnitude larger than the ones that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. This is the time in which these bombs were new, still being developed. There was no reduction of this sort of stuff. And we had, within 20 years, you had seen a bomb be dropped by your country. So it's like, it was very real that this could happen. I feel like nowadays there's a bit more complacency because it hasn't happened in so long to where it seems like it's not going to, right?
Yeah, there's this, I'm not sure where it comes from, but there's this idea that like, the generation that goes to war, the following generation will maybe learn from that and see, oh shit, we shouldn't go to war. It's horrific. Look at all this aftermath and everything like that. But enough time passes, those young kids come along 2 or 3 generations later. They don't know what the horrors were like when the war was going on, and so they're, like you said, the
lesson might have been lost.
The lesson's lost, and then it's ready to continue itself, and the cycle might come back around. And it's really scary to think about, like you're saying, this was 20 years out from a bomb being dropped, and now we're 50, 60, what are we, 70 years?
70. Well, yeah, from one being dropped in a war. Yeah.
In a war, yeah. And so, I mean, it's just really scary to think of where people are right now. And like, that's why I just like, if I hear people talking about like why we should be in wars and why wars are good, it just scares me. Cause it's like, I feel like till and like, it's not that I know, I just try to understand and empathize, I guess.
And we know now that tensions with Russia have reignited, right? And if their, favorite president doesn't get reelected, how are things going to change between the U.S., you know what I mean, and them? And are they going to continue to try and meddle with elections? Are they going to continue to try and affect things? And at what point does that turn into actual aggression? I don't know. Yeah, if you unless you call that actual aggression, which some people could and should. But you know what I mean? I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing. It's just like, it's scary, right? Because it's like, are we headed for another Cold War of some kind? Or are we in the middle of one? Maybe you could argue we are.
Yeah.
But let's dial in on Quentin here, because he is a kind of an interesting character in his reasoning. He has this concept of America's official position is to only strike in retaliation to a Soviet Union nuclear attack. So if they were to hit us, we would hit them back. And it's sort of this mutual assured destruction thing that has everybody at a standstill. And he believes that this is a mistake, and that the only way to win this inevitable war is to take the first strike. And he thinks right now is the time. I forget the exact reasons, but it seems like the Soviet Union was a little bit down, like they were repairing certain things and installing some new systems, and so not all of their stuff was fully operational. So he identified that like this is the time to do it. And this plan that he uses is created so that if the Soviet Union destroyed DC and destroyed much of the leadership, that these bombers would still carry out the mission without having to take any sort of outside input. And because of that, since he's been able to manipulate this plan into action, the crew of this the main bomber that we follow, they believe that this has happened and that the U.S. has been struck with nuclear weapons, and that they are the sort of the vengeance of America, and they take that's the tragedy of the book, is how deadly serious they take this, right?
Well, they're thinking about their families. They're thinking about everybody who's potentially gone and wiped out. And what they like you said, they're the
counting
vengeance,
on
they're
them.
the revenge. Yeah. And it's well set up because in the very beginning, they're kind of coming back from a mission. They're going to get to come stateside and be back home. But
well, they're approaching the X point, which is like the point in which they turn back, and they're looking ahead. They're like, as soon as we get past this X point, we get to turn back, and we're looking ahead to what after we get that, we'll relax because we know that nothing's going to happen. Like this is the big moment on their flight, and they're approaching it, right?
And the part that I love about this is somebody's thinking about how massive, you were talking about the bombs that were dropped on like Nagasaki, Hiroshima, but the ones that they have, the ones that are riding in the cargo bay, and like that ominous feeling of just like knowing how much power is underneath you or near you.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's megatons versus kilotons, which is like megabytes versus kilobytes. So you know that that's a big difference in power. So yeah, the 2 bombs they have are enormous.
But just think about being nearby that.
Yeah, or like you can drop it on a base that's like out near enough to a city that the entire city is just gone.
Yeah.
It's just wild to think about the size of that.
So Quentin, I think we've seen that kind of character a lot in films and books, but I think the most compelling villains are the ones that clearly think they're right. And all villains, I think, do think they're right. And that's the thing, is like, there are people who could be in these positions of power who feel that they're doing the right thing so strongly that they're not willing to listen to anyone else, that they're willing to take things into their own hands. And I felt that was the really scary part, was just that Quentin is someone who is to be, he's high up enough to where he can concoct this little plan here, and he's basically just making it look like the U.S. has been attacked, then nobody else can make the call but him, so he makes the call to retaliate.
I think that's a good point. Like you said, this guy thinks he is the hero of the story. And I was actually kind of surprised at how many other people, and maybe I shouldn't be, but how many people up the chain of command kind of were like, yeah, he actually is probably doing the right thing here. I kind of agree with it, even though I'm not going to say that, right? A lot of these generals seem. You're
saying like the Pentagon people?
Yeah, a lot of the people later that we get, like the generals were like, yeah, this it's rash, but it's actually probably a good decision. So the only option we have is to go forward with it. And I think Peter George is trying to make a point about that sort of bloodthirsty, like there's a mindset that is prevalent, right? That is dangerous, and I think he was highlighting that.
And even if it's just a survival, these guys are like war generals. So even if it's just a survival basis, they're thinking, oh yeah, this attack is on its way, so I don't have to make that decision anymore. But if we send in more, we can actually take out the threat and potentially win. And so it's like the easiest, it's the path of least resistance. So why not just go with it? And yeah, like you said, it's just scary that everybody, that mob mentality, like everybody's ready to guarantee their own safety at the cost of millions.
Well, and that's why, like, obviously, I have huge respect for our armed forces and the danger that, soldiers put themselves in, and the decisions people have to make, the life and death things. I absolutely am in awe of that stuff and have huge respect. However, I think it is important to have a opposing side within our country to make sure that, because the war machine is made to be a war machine, right? Like, it's made to destroy, it's made to win. And once it's deployed, that's what it does. And that's sort of what Quentin is counting on, that he can deploy the U.S. war machine and then it will win, because he'll start it into something that is irreversible. But there has to be cooler heads out there, right? Especially when you're talking about thermonuclear weapons that can wipe out the world, and that's what we're dealing with here, and the potential for that. So I don't know. I thought it was well handled. I don't know enough about these command structures to say whether or not it's completely accurate. But I was definitely along for the ride, and it's scary stuff. And like I said, I can only imagine how scary it would have been in the height of the actual Cold War, right?
Definitely. And scary for these guys who are, like you said, like risking their lives on this plane that has this bomb, and they're the last line of defense now. They have to like protect or avenge at this point. And,
right, and it's tragic, right?
Yeah, the decisions that are made by people who aren't there that affect these people, that will get them killed, it's tragic, like you said. Yeah,
they think they're these heroes, and actually everyone, including their own country, is trying to stop them from doing the thing they're doing. Yet they're out there like heroically fighting for what they believe in.
And that's the thing, like if they were doing the thing that they were told to do, they are heroes,
Yeah.
They're acting in morally, they're doing what's heroic, and they're sacrificing themselves for the greater good. Yeah. The problem is the people up above are making decisions that they're having to carry out.
Right, and in this plot description here, it says the moribund U.S. Air Force general. Oh, it says general here. It says a general, Quentin, and that reminds me that I think early on we learned that he is terminally ill. So that's another reason why he's willing to go through with this, right? Like, he's in a position where he's like, well, they don't even know yet, but I'm not long for this world, so I'm going to take my last thing here and go for it. And anytime you have this kind of power that resides in one person, and he's identified that he has the ability to do that, like, that's inherently dangerous and should not exist. So I'm hopeful that these sort of stories like got into our government enough for them to look at their systems and make sure that not just one rogue general could just decide to start World War III.
I hope so, man. I really hope so. I just, like, sometimes I hear how some things are going, and I don't know how secure everything necessarily is, but maybe we're meant to think that, I don't know, on any given day we're meant to think that it is secure or not secure based on who's telling it and all that other stuff. So
And I do think the crew of the Alabama Angel and the all of the like interpersonal relationships and the way they regarded their mission and a lot of the stuff just describing the plane and its flight, and that was all really exciting, well written, and I think authentic. And it didn't shock me to learn that the author has this sort of history behind him, because I thought that was some of the best stuff. And I actually don't remember how much stuff we get in the movie on the bomber itself. So I'll be curious to track that, because I felt like that was some of the best stuff in this book. Although
yeah,
I liked a lot of the stuff in the War Room too, but I also particularly liked the Alabama Angel stuff.
Yeah, and that was where we got more human stuff. You know, it's not just generals carrying out orders and things like that. We get people with actual thoughts and thinking of family and all that.
Are you ready for the next bit of plot?
Yeah, but really quickly,
Go ahead.
You were mentioning you don't remember how much is in the adaptation. I think that's partially maybe where Peter George was pushing back against Kubrick's initial satirical viewpoint on this story, because it was something that he had gone through. You know what I mean? He'd been in these war scenarios, and like seeing it turned into a joke, I can see where someone might feel like if it's not handled perfectly, it could be just like really offensive.
Yeah, and my understanding is that Kubrick felt ultimately that the satire was going to get through to people more than showing it as a fully serious film. And I think that that's a tough concept to get your head around, especially if you've written this book and you're very serious about it. But it sounds like he came around once he saw the final product, so that's cool to hear to me.
Yeah, it reminds me of like Charlie Chaplin's the Dictator, the Great Dictator. It's like that kind of. It's basically he's been sending up Hitler. He's making fun of Hitler, and it was fairly. I mean, I think it was before the real rise of Nazism and the spreading of it. It had been affecting people, but it wasn't like World War II wasn't fully in effect yet, I don't think. So just the idea that like Charlie Chaplin took it upon himself to make a film because of the eradication of Jews that was going on. He made a film making fun of the scariest man in the world, Hitler, and instead of doing it in like a serious way, in a dramatic way that would like affect people and make them cry and all this stuff, he made them like cry with laughter and realize the absurdity in it and like how funny it was and how ridiculous it is that like this could be happening. And then also brought joy to people in a time that was tough, which you could say maybe Kubrick was doing as well.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. I haven't seen that movie, but that's an interesting. We should revisit that once we get to the film for sure. Let me read a little bit more plot here. So, when the U.S. president and cabinet become aware that the attack is underway, they assist the Soviet defense interception of the USAF bombers, to little effect, because the Soviets destroy only 2 bombers and damage 1, the Alabama Angel, which remains airborne and en route to its target. So this opens up the whole war room scenario and the president and all these generals. What was your take on these characters? What was your take on the president and how he functioned in this story? He was kind of the hero in a way of the story, right?
Yeah, I mean the big thing that we learn obviously is that the president is aware of the Russian like super weapon, super whatever you would call it, that's ready to destroy the world, which is something I wanted to talk about.
World killing bombs, yeah.
Right. And like that's also terrifying. Like I'm sure that there's, maybe not one specific thing, but I'm sure there are like things in order to that like countries potentially have that could just wipe out the earth. They could say like we want the earth to be gone and then just wipe it out.
I don't know if this is true. So the theory is that what's proposed in the book is that the Russians have a bunch of these bombs in mountains in Russia with no plans to actually launch them, but they're in a position to where if they detonate them, it's going to create enough fallout, enough poison, enough radiation, enough of a gas or a dust cloud, what have you, that it will destroy the planet ultimately. And if they know they're going out, that they're going to just detonate them, right? Am I misremembering that?
No, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it is. But I don't think that actually does exist or did exist. I'm not sure. But the idea that it could is absolutely like just the idea that your whole country is decimated and then you're just like, or like everyone's at war really, and then just the idea of being like, let's just wipe off all life off the face of the earth. And
that's kind of the scary stuff that also there was all this like this really dark math being done well, if you destroy this city then we'll destroy this city, and like it just the way they were equating things, and like, well, obviously it's got to be fair. So that's the only fair way to do it. And it's like, none of this is fair. None of this is right. None of this should be happening. And sometimes I can see Kubrick's perspective on this, because sometimes you just wanted to throttle these people and go, what are you talking about right now? Like, it's insanity.
Okay, I can't even imagine being in a position like that. I can't even like begin to comprehend what kind of mindset, mentality you would need to be in to talk about people in this way. And I'm sure presidents and other officials have to, but it's just like, it's not something I want to have to deal with. I mean, how do you even have a normal life?
We should talk about that particular scene at the end there, because I don't know if I believe that it would go down that way. So we can talk about that more when we get there. But yeah, I mean, it's something to live with that. I mean, people make these kinds of decisions in a way all the time, and it's something people have to live with. And I always remember that quote. I can't remember who it's attributed to. It might even be like Stalin or somebody, but it's like the death of a person is a tragedy. The death of a million people is a statistic, right? And absolutely, you see that at play all the time, and I think you see it here, where it's very easy for them to abstractly talk about a city or a million people, but then like if you're standing in front of a person and that person gets killed, like it's this, it's a tragedy. So I don't know, it's the distance, right?
Yeah, but I mean that's the danger, definitely. The idea that you forget the humanity in it, and you're just that's the main thing. Is just everyone's a person.
And not to mention the ecological and ramifications and all that stuff that they don't even touch on in this book, which rightfully so. I don't believe these characters would be thinking about it. So the president, he's described as being this, like, to me he reminds me of what I think the ideal president is in a lot of people's mind, and like he behaves in the way that is like how we hope our presidents will behave in times of war. And he's like heroic. He's firm, yet he knows when to negotiate. He knows when to give ground, but then he also has like a breaking point where he won't go past, and he commands respect and all of the above, right? And I just couldn't help but think about how complete opposite is what we have right now, and imagine our current president in this scenario, just throwing tantrums and probably pushing every button in sight. It's scary stuff.
I went to Disney World, and this is kind of off topic, but I went to Disney World, and the Hall of Presidents has Donald Trump in it, and it was really weird and eerie, because he spoke in this recording that they have, which I don't even think was him. I think it was probably a voice actor. It's the most eloquent I've ever heard him talk. It's the most level-headed I've ever heard him talk. And it was, that kind of was making me think of just like, man, like if there is some sort of, horrific thing that happens, or a hard decision, I'm sure he's made hard decisions, but if there's something that like he has to decide whether we go to war or not, like I just can't even see this person acting rationally. I don't know. It scares the hell out of me, man, because we're talking about people who have their fingers on the button, just like this story.
Yeah, man. And, you want it. This guy that in this book is what you want, and I do not believe that's what we have. But let's move back into the book here. So the president is also like kind of the only politician in a room full of generals, and so I think that also puts him in an interesting spot where he is sort of more. But really, the only reason he's not all for war is because of this. He knows about this secret plan the Russians have to destroy the world if they get attacked. And that's what he reveals to them. He says, like, we're not going to win this war by doing this. It's just going to kill the world. And I don't know, it's wild. Like the idea of these guys standing around talking about the destruction of the entire planet in such like calm ways, I think has to have lent itself to Stanley Kubrick's version of this movie, right? Because it's right. Ludicrous in some ways. Like people, this should be. I don't know, man. It's wild.
That's what I'm talking about. Like you can't be a normal human being. You're not a person. You're like some sort of like weird robot that's making decisions based on like statistics and like what's I don't know what's going to create the most destruction or the least destruction. And it's crazy because the like Kubrick does hit on it a little bit. It's like, how can people be like this? How can they be so removed?
Yeah, and I think you would argue that like if you're struggling with this kind of stuff in the situation, like that's the fallback, is to just rationalize everything and to go down and say, well, let's just look at numbers, and this number is bigger than this number, so we got to go with the smaller number of casualties and so forth. And like that's how people have to behave. But if you are able to step back a level further than that and look at what's happening, it's just ludicrous. And then it's so unfair and just like bizarre to have it all set off by this Quentin guy. He also, around this time, he has like commanded his base to fire on anyone who approaches, and even if they're wearing U.S. uniforms that assume that they're the enemy. And he's given all these orders, and sure enough, they try and raid the fortress, and they're firing upon them. So
this is the part where it starts to feel like a little iffy to me, because this idea that a chain of command, the war machine, things are going on, soldiers listen to generals, but if you're just being told to fire on U.S. soldiers, you might want to think about what the general's telling you to do.
Well, apparently that's built into this plan, is that they might come wearing our uniforms to try and infiltrate. I don't know, man. Maybe the paranoia was such at the time that people would buy this. There's also a certain extent of like people just doing what their orders are. And if they tell you to do this, that you're just going to do it because those are your orders. Which we know is, historically is some scary shit, but it does happen.
This also brings into question Quentin, though, because it's like he thinks he's doing the right thing, and he is by the United States, and he just feels that like these soldiers who are being sacrificed are like a
just for the greater good.
Sacrifice, yeah, for the greater good, and it's just crazy to think that he thinks that like killing American soldiers to ensure that a bomb goes off, and it just doesn't seem like the heroic way to do it. It seems like a cowardly way to do it.
Oh, absolutely. I think he's a reprehensible character, and his own delusion is such that it's interesting, though, because we see like he has like a second in command or somebody under him as other character. I think his name's Howard, who is there, and we get a lot of this from Howard's perspective. And although this book does a lot of head hopping, so we get like everyone's perspective, but Howard is sort of buying into this madness for a minute, and then it's when he sees the base firing on American soldiers that he kind of snaps out of it and realizes just how ludicrous this is, right? So let me read the next little bit of plot summary here. The U.S. government reestablishes the SAC Air Base chain of command, but the general who launched the attack, the only man knowing the recall code, kills himself before capture and interrogation.
So Quentin, this is him again. He's a coward. He takes the coward's way out. They're under attack. They lose, and then he kills himself. He's not long for the world. He's gonna die soon, and so like his duty is done. And once he hears that like the plane is out of reach of being basically brought back, he thinks it's far enough away to where they won't be able to recall it. He kills himself, and it's just crazy because it's like that's like, again, if he felt that this was so right, why would he kill himself?
He knew deep down that it was wrong, and he just didn't want to have to face, like you said, it's cowardly, because it's like he didn't want to have to face people telling him how wrong he is. And ultimately he decides, and maybe he was worried that he would crack, right, and that he'd give up the code, so he decided to make that not happen, that maybe they'd torture him or something, and so I can kind of see the move, but it doesn't mean that it's not cowardly. Yeah, it's a dark moment in the book, especially considering what happened with the author. So it feels like it's powerless, and this book does a good job of like making you feel powerless, right? Like he keeps putting these characters in positions where there's nothing they can do. Like they can't reach the bombers. They don't have the code to recall them. This guy, only guy who knew it, is now dead. Like, it
really makes me appreciate the film. I just like, this is so bleak, and it's so like it just, you want to laugh at it because it's so ridiculous. It's so this idea that like someone like this could make all of this happen and basically cause like an incoming nuclear holocaust. And I just can't wait to get to the movie because it's just, I don't know, it's just better. It's just better. It's that relief, that humor, that valve relief I feel like we need in this story.
So Quentin's executive officer correctly deduces the recall code for the bombers from among the general's desk pad doodles. The code is received by the surviving bomber aircraft, and they are successfully recalled minutes before bombing their targets in the Soviet Union, save for the Alabama Angel, whose earlier damaged radio prevents its recalling, and it progresses to its target. So this is a kind of cool storytelling thing here that I like, and that's All is lost. Oh no, wait, no, all is not lost. We're gonna everything's gonna be okay. Oh wait, no, all is still lost. And that's where everybody believes that this has been averted. The Russian ambassador and the president are sort of like celebrating the fact that this was averted at the last possible minute because they got this code from the doodles, which, I can buy that maybe this guy would do that. He would doodle it and not think anyone would be able to figure it out. But luckily enough, he does it and they're able to recall. But this one plane that has been damaged, has been hit, doesn't get the recall code and is like heroically, quote unquote, soldiering on and is nearing the final thing. And they have to go through some crazy shit to get through the flak, to get close to this base. And the way it's described is really, really compelling. They're flying super low. They're taking hits. People are dying. Like crew members are dying left and right. Brown, the commander or the pilot, has taken a mortal wound and is literally like flying through the pain, knowing that he's going to die soon, and trying to just like complete his mission. And at the same time that all this is happening, we know that they're trying to shoot him down, and like they're actually the one thing that is a problem now. And if they would just stop, everything would be okay. But they don't know that.
And because we cared about the characters, because they were set up, and we kind of understood the humanity of the soldiers on the quote unquote on the ground, but the ones who were in the plane, the ones who were up there that were having to do it, we want to see them succeed because they're being so heroic and they're doing everything right by their country, and yet they need to be shot down, otherwise the world could end. So it's really interesting storytelling technique there. And
sure enough, they're not able to actually stop them. So, in a last effort to avert a Soviet-American nuclear war, the U.S. president offers Soviet premier the compensatory right to destroy Atlantic City, New Jersey. At the final moment, the Alabama Angel fails to destroy its target, and nuclear catastrophe is averted. That's not really true, actually. That's kind of a oversimplification. So, what actually happens in the book is they miss their target by a little bit. And they crash, and the bomb is damaged in the crash in such a way that the larger, I don't really know how the bomb works. I can't describe it. I'm not a scientist, but there's like a larger portion to the bomb that is the main explosion, and that part of it separates from the interior of the bomb, which is a smaller explosion that is still supposedly about the size of the Hiroshima bomb, or maybe even bigger. And that is the bomb that goes off. They end up dropping, which kills everyone on the plane, but they all died during the crash anyway, I believe. And the bomb goes off and wipes them out. But come to find out, they were enough off target to where it didn't destroy the base and it didn't destroy the city. Instead, it was in a quote unquote uninhabited zone in Russia.
Right. So the bomb never dropped, as we were led to believe. Though we thought that the bomb dropped, but then we like kind of cut away. And then we get the crash, and we think...
No, it dropped, but I think it dropped, like, something about the way it dropped was wrong. Like, something about, like, the fin didn't raise.
For some reason, I thought it was, like, still on board. Like, I thought it was still on board the plane as it crashed, and that's what prevented it from...
Yeah, I think it's unclear, because I think they say that that's what happened, but I think they actually did drop it. But I think something in its, like, onboard, like... computer stuff got screwed up or something, and it just didn't do the thing it was supposed to do. I don't know the exact thing, but it caused it to hit the ground before it was supposed to, and because it was supposed to detonate in midair actually, and they were too low, and so it hit the ground, and that damaged it in a way, I think.
So basically, like disaster averted for the most part. It still went off. It's still going to affect some stuff, but it's much smaller than it would have been. So it seemingly, like in terms of the story, it just didn't affect, like it wasn't, crisis was averted in terms of the story.
Yeah. So a couple of big things happen leading up to this, though, because like it talks about, the president agrees to because they think that the Soviet city is going to get destroyed. So in a preliminary agreement, the president says you can have Atlantic City, and he starts evacuating it. And then the Russians are like, actually, we got a submarine off the coast, and we're gonna bomb it in 15 minutes, which is, they have not had enough time to evacuate it, and they're like preparing to do that, right? So all this comes down to like seconds of minutes of windows of things being averted. And then there's like a moment where the Soviets were going to do it anyway, but then they don't.
What was the reasoning for Atlantic City, and how did you feel about that being chosen?
Supposedly it was around the same population, and I think they chose it because it was like in a zone where they felt like the ecological damage would be lessened, and with the way the prevailing winds are, the fallout wouldn't be as bad. I don't know how accurate all that is. It seems to me like some of this stuff was poorly understood anyway. But I mean, it's one of those things where it's like there's no good decision. And this is what we were talking about earlier. Like, how do you possibly make a decision like this? If you had a list of cities and someone says one of these cities has got to go, you know what I mean? Like, how do you just go, yeah, this is the one? Like, did you have a bad day gambling at Atlantic City? So you're like, fuck that city. Like, how do you choose?
Right. You can't. It's crazy.
Yeah. The tragedy of the actual plane is really engaging to me. We see Brown, this pilot. He actually like powers through to the bitter end, releases the bomb, and then it's said that he dies before the second guy can even hit the button to like fully release the bomb. And like that's how close it was, and how much he was just like giving everything he had to get this mission completed. And so that's the dark side of it too. Is it's like you see these heroic efforts by this crew, and yet it's all for nothing. And not only is it for nothing, it's like in the wrong. Yeah. But it's not their fault, but it just is.
Yeah. It was a cool way to tell the story because it made us care about these characters, and it gave us kind of this like, we want them to succeed, but we don't. I kind of talked about it earlier. Just this idea that like they're doing everything they can, and then ultimately like we need them to fail. But I wanted to talk about the like you said, it's coming down to seconds and moments, and this Atlantic City thing, the Russians almost attack it, and it's within like a minute or two that like they call it off just in time, and everything's happening like right in the nick of time. So it's very thriller-ish. Like it's clearly a very thriller thing to do, like get it up to the very last possible second and snip the wire to the bomb or whatever it is,
I don't know if I buy that. Even take Trump out of it. Let's just say, like average U.S. president from the last 50 years or 20 years, what have you, would a president make this sort of decision? Because I kind of don't know that they would. And I feel like, although in this scenario you understand why he decides to make this trade, it just seems to me like there'd be no way that they'd actually agree to this. And if it came out that they had, I don't know that they, you know what I mean? I don't know that the public would ever go like, oh yeah, we totally get it. You know what I mean?
But we're talking like, let them attack something or end the world, And that's the thing is like, I don't know that I buy it either. Maybe a president would say just like, fuck it, we're not going to sacrifice our own people. We're going to let the whole world die or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. But would the Russians actually kill the world over the one city? Would they be? But maybe it's like we got hit, so we're going to go to war, and whatever happens, happens. Yeah. That was the big question that no one knew, and like luckily no one had to put it to the test of like one side actually detonating a bomb. That's the scary shit though, and like that was what everyone was worried about, like what would happen. And this book asks that question. And I think it is a good question to ask. Did you think that the bomb was going to go off in the end?
Yes.
You did.
Yeah, I'm not going to give my reason, but
yeah, I kept expecting them to in some way like get the message there, because the other thing is like, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of glad I didn't have to see it, but I kept expecting we were going to get a scene where the crew of the Alabama Angel all of a sudden realized that everything they've done has been for nothing.
Yeah,
but almost mercifully they don't have to experience that, right?
Yeah.
So they can go out believing themselves heroes.
Yeah, it's like a mercy to their character for that. It's like that, like you said, like they died heroically and they did all of these things, and if they did know that they were failures in the end, like how much more, that's a lot more dark, and maybe that's not what Peter Bryant or Peter George was going for.
There's some good writing in here too. Like there was a moment where Brown he felt like an itch in his toes, and then he like tried to move his toes and he couldn't move them, and then he tried to move his foot and he couldn't move that, and then he was like realized that his leg was dead. He's like, oh, my leg's dead now. And that wound I have must be worse than I thought. And like that was just so dark, and the way it was written was affecting.
Yeah, I was surprised. For as much as I said, like in the beginning, I mentioned that I wasn't fully engaged all the way through. It was a thriller. Like it did keep when it was going, it was going. Definitely, I think that the scenes that
especially the last like 20-25%. I think
when it's tense and everything's going off all at the same time, and it's coming down to seconds, it does its job as a thriller for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and we do, since this book was written in the 50s, in case you were wondering, we do definitely get some casual, unchallenged misogyny.
Yeah.
just thrown about between these guys. I mean, I'm not shocked to see it in there. I'm also not saying it's not authentic to what these characters would think and how they would feel. But, you know, we also get it from the ambassador, and I don't know. There's just I've come to expect it if you read a book, you know, set in these times by written by a white dude. And that's what this book is. So we ultimately do get it. So be aware of that if you're ever going to pick up this book too. Although it's not, we've seen worse. It's not like awful, but it's in there. But yeah, man, that's Red Alert. Yeah, it was. I'm glad I read it. It kind of reminds me of as most similar comparison I have is Nothing Lasts Forever that we read for Die Hard, in the sense that it's a book that I feel like has largely been forgotten. Different tonally than the famous adaptation, which was the same thing in that book, right? And while I still, both of these books, I kind of think of them about the same, as like they were both kind of okay. I'm still glad I read them both, because it's given me a cool perspective on a famous movie. And I think that's what this podcast is kind of about, right? And you know, this is one that we definitely aren't expecting everyone to have read with us, but hopefully that, you know, we can provide the service of telling you what this book's like and what it's about, and now you can know about it. So, yeah, in that sense, I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I enjoy it for the same reason. I love Dr. Strangelove, and I think bringing the context of what I know from the book and seeing, first of all, seeing Kubrick's process through this serious book and making it satirical. It's going to be really interesting to key into the exact specifics of what we read in the book and what he pulled over and what he left out. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely did compare it to Die Hard as well. I felt myself being like, I felt very similar, like you said, to how I felt when I read Die Hard. It was just like, yeah, it was fine. It was a thriller. There were parts that I liked about it. There were parts that were thrilling and did it really well, and then there were parts that were just typical thriller fare, I feel like.
Yeah.
So it was a cool experience, and I'm really looking forward to watching the movie this week.
Me too, man. And shout out to our mutual friend Tom. He's actually the person who introduced me to Doctor Strangelove, the movie, insisted that I needed to watch it and got me to watch it. And hopefully he listens to this episode, because, you know, I definitely know a lot of what I know through him. So hopefully he enjoyed it.
Very cool. Yeah. Shout out to him then.
If you wanted to find out how to become a patron, go to patreon.com/inktofilm, and you can find out what sort of bonus stuff we're offering on there. We do bonus episodes every month. We're going to have another one coming out this month. And remember, we have that special offer going as well, up until August 11th. So if you're thinking about it, definitely look into it now.
Connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all of those at inktofilm. And make sure to join our Council of Inklings on Facebook, because that's where we post polls and post adaptation news and all kinds of stuff that'll keep you engaged with what we're potentially going to be talking about, or maybe future projects.
And the other way you can help this podcast out that doesn't cost you anything is leaving us a rating and review on either iTunes or Facebook or wherever you can like talk publicly about it. That always helps us out. And also just like telling a person like that, you know, word of mouth would be, you know, great. We heard a story today, or I heard a story, I guess it was yesterday, on the Council of Inklings, someone who got introduced to this podcast through a friend of theirs. And I love to hear that sort of stuff. So hopefully we can get some more of that action.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you to Jennifer Delazana for providing our transcripts, and thank you to Multi Music for the use of our intro and outro music.
Yep. All right, man. I think that's going to be it for this week. I'm excited about Doctor Strangelove. I haven't seen it in a long time. Eager to watch it again. I know that Kubrick's going to be an interesting director to follow, so I'm curious to see what kind of research you can come up with for it.
Yeah, definitely. And this is earlier Kubrick, so it'll be really cool to kind of see where he was at this point in his career.
Nice. All right, man. I think that's it. So until next time.
Thanks for listening.